Well, welcome everyone to the new Market Realities webinar. I hope this all finds everyone healthy and well and safe. And I have to commend everyone for being here today. I know that there are lots of options out there, choices of things that you can be participating in. And just want to thank you for spending the next hour or so with us here today. And it just kind of demonstrates what an amazing group of professionals that you are, that you guys want to hopefully walk away with some things that you can carry on to your conversations and interactions with your clients and customers. So would also like to thank Rick Stevens, who is on with us, who will be joining me a little bit later on during the webinar to kind of give us an update on what's going on in the mortgage world. And just a bit of housekeeping, this presentation will be available on SharePoint, and I will also make the recording itself available for anybody who wants to go back and watch. But you are welcome to use any of the slides in the slide deck in any manner that you see fit. So unless we have any other questions, yes, and if you'd like to go ahead in the chat, if you would like to put in your questions there, then I will try and monitor those as we are going about the webinar and get to them as quickly as I can. So let's see. All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started. And my goal really today is to hopefully give you guys just an overview of where we've been in 2020 in the first quarter, kind of where things are right now in our market, and where we think things are going to be going over the next 30, 60 days, and then how we most likely will probably finish out 2020. And really what I want you guys to walk away with is just some nuggets, some conversation points. So as you get asked questions about what's going on in the market, where do you think the market's going? What's going on with pricing? Are we going to see prices decline? Are we going to see prices go up? You know, all those kinds of questions. I'm hoping that you will be able to be better informed and have some things that you can actually reference and point to as you're having conversations with your clients. So we are going to go ahead and jump right into it. And like I said, things we'll cover today are market trends prior to the pandemic, where we are now, and where we are going. So we're going to take a look at a lot of statistics and and I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the actual statistics themselves, but I will spend some time on particular slides more so than others. Initially, we're going to take a look at kind of where we've been, what was the sales history like over the last 90 days. We'll then take a look at what's going on with the inventory that's currently on the market, what's been happening with the pending inventory. We'll take a look at things like price reductions, what's the days on market, what's the month supply been, and really kind of want to just give you guys a reference point to kind of where we were in the market before all this hit us. So you then can share with sellers and buyers, look, what we're getting ready to move into or the trends that we're seeing, some of this was happening before all of this occurred. So nothing that was happening now that we're moving, through this and then out of it should really come as much as a surprise to many folks. And so again, just kind of giving you a little bit of history of where we've been and what we can probably expect moving forward as we continue through all this. And because we have such a large group on this call representing a lot of different markets, I chose to go ahead and just kind of really look at a county by county comparison. And honestly, having done this for a while now, seeing the trends I see by county, pretty much the same trend lines are going to follow by areas. So we look at Fulton and some statistics there. The same is going to be true for whether it's Buckhead or our North Fulton communities. For Cobb, same is going to be true for East Cobb, West Cobb, DeKalb, same is going to be true for in-town. So Again, we're not really diving in deep like I typically have done in the past, but the county by county is giving you a good trend line and a good basis to have these conversations by. So what you're looking at, though, on the first slide here is the sales summary for the first quarter 2020 by the 4 counties that I've detailed. And the first number there, you have the units closed in the first column. You have the number of price reductions of those closings, and then what the percent of those price reductions was. And if you've been participating with me on these market updates, the trend is continuing. We are seeing about a third of the market being overpriced for the closings that have occurred over the first 90 days in 2020. So not a huge change from what we were seeing in most of 19. The trend continued for the first quarter going into 2020. And then what I've done for you, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, but I've broken the counties down into price points for you so you can kind of see, and I've dedicated it to under 500, 500 to $1 million, and $1 million and above. And on the breakdown for the counties, again, I'm showing you what number of units closed under each price point, what percentage of the market that entailed, and then the next column you'll see is price reductions, how many price reductions occurred by price point, and then what that percentage was of the overall market. And then I have broken out over to the 2 right-hand columns, the total days on market for the non-reductions versus those homes that had to experience a price reduction. So you can kind of see what the impact of the overpricing had in terms of additional days on market. So that's what you're going to see over the next 4 slides. It's just a breakdown by county of what's been happening. So for example, in Cherokee, almost 90% of the overall market in Cherokee were homes priced under 500. About 9.5% of the market is between 5 and $1 million, and only not even 1% of the market, 0.7% of the market, were homes closing over $1 million. But the big thing to kind of pay attention to, and we'll talk about days on market here in a little bit and how it's actually probably going to be a statistic that doesn't have as much relevance for us probably over the next 6 months because of the hold that FMLS has put in place, and just, the fact that, we've seen a significant decline in the number of showings and pendings. But nonetheless, what you're going to see here is a general trend of anywhere from 2.5 to 4 months of market time on the market. Let's see. Price, no, the new analyst in the corporate home office did not compile these. These are all coming straight from my own personal research. So moving along, the next county that we have is Cherokee again. And what I've done here is looking at the month supply and the total days on market again by price point. So for the next several slides we're going to take a look at is going to be broken down by county, and then you're going to see the first slide will be how many sales under each price point, and the next will show you what the month supply was and the total days on market. And again, as we go through these counties, you're going to see a general trend that we are experiencing in the first part of 2020, that our month supply number, for the most part, was decreasing, although it doesn't necessarily reflect here in Cherokee. And our total days on market was increasing, comparing it to the same time period in 2020. So if we look at Cobb County again, next, the under 500, the different price ranges, 83, 84% of the market was under 500, almost 15%, the 500 to $1 million, and $1 million above, just a little over 1%. You'll see your total days on market for non-reductions versus the actual reductions. And then if we look at the total days on market summary, 1.7 months was the trend. So definitely our seller's market rather, for under 500 in Cobb. And then you see where we were from 500 to $1 million and $1 million and above, and the total days on market. So again, as a general rule of thumb, across all of our counties, as you will continue to see, we're seeing on average about a third of the market overpriced. And if you compare the total days on market for the non-reductions versus the price reductions, anywhere from 2.5 to 4 times additional time on market, regardless of the county that we look at. So we're looking at DeKalb again right now. And in DeKalb, for homes under 500,000, it was a 2.3 month supply this year, same versus last year. For homes 500 to a million, the month supply decreased 3.6 to 4.3. But then again, if you look at the total days on market, except for the million and above, which was moving very, very well, it's more days on market, and the month supply typically was a little less. So again, even in DeKalb here, you look, we really almost were a seller's market across all price points except the million above. I would say that was a balanced market. And then finally, looking in Fulton County, again, it follows the same trend lines. About a third of the market, a third to 40% of the market overpriced. And again, you see the different where those were occurring and the total reductions. And then the days on market summary for month supply and total days on market. So in the million plus in Fulton County, currently had an 8.6 month supply versus a 10.1 month supply in 2019. And you can see the total days on market across all price points slightly higher than it was in 2019. Catching up on some, will you be sending these stats out to us? Yes, they will all be made available to you and available on SharePoint. Emily will send out a link to where that information can be found. So just some conversation points as it relates to the kind of where we've been across all counties. Roughly a third of the market was overpriced across all price points. Generally speaking, the trend was a reduction in the month supply across all price points. And then generally speaking, the trend was an increase on days of market across all price points. And when sellers miss the mark on pricing, homes are typically on the market anywhere from 2.5 to 4 times longer than homes priced correctly, which represents additional carrying costs in the form of mortgage payments, utilities, just general upkeep on keeping those houses in a state to where you ordinarily would if you were living in them. So where are we now? What's going on with the current inventory? And so here is just another, again, we're going to do it by county, taking a look at the what's going on in each county, and I'll explain kind of what you're looking at on this table. So the current inventory in 2020, that number, for example, for Cherokee of 1,059, that represents a 9.4% reduction of where we were in inventory a year ago, which is your next column over. So Cherokee actually has been the least impacted of the 4 counties we're taking a look at today. If you take a look at Cobb, current inventory is down about 30% of where it was a year ago. For DeKalb County, it's down about 34%, and for Fulton, it's down almost 43%. Again, and these numbers were taken a couple days ago, so if you look today, they may not be spot on, but they're going to be pretty close. But in Fulton, the inventory a year ago was a little over 5,500 units, and right now we're at about 3,150. What I did too is take a look at the current inventory, and of those things currently on the market, how many of those listings have experienced a price reduction during the current listing FMLS number. And again, you'll see that the trend line is following right along with the closings that have occurred. And about a third of the current inventory on the market has experienced a price reduction during the listing term, which means that a third of the market is overpriced right now. The other thing too I wanted to take a look at and share with all of you is just taking a look at the number of withdrawals that we've experienced year to date versus the number of withdrawals from the previous year, because some people are thinking, well, sellers are taking their homes off the market. I know FMLS introduced the new hold category, so I've also put that information on this slide for you as well. And what you'll see is, in a lot of cases, the number of withdrawals was actually fewer this year than last year. Now, if you add in the holds, then For most purposes in most counties, it represents a little bit more inventory. But what it boils down to is we already had a housing supply issue going into 2020 and didn't have enough inventory, but still had great buyer demand. With the current environment that's going on right now, you can see that, in most of our markets, our inventory is down 30 to 40%. And that's just going to put, I think, an increase in pent-up demand from the buyers. So when we do resume and can get out from underneath all of this, it's just going to mean that those sellers who are currently on the market are going to have more eyeballs looking at their properties. And we're going to continue this supply issue that we've had with regards to not being able to keep up with buyer demand. Let's see, going back to some questions. All of your data is Q1 2020 versus Q1 2019. Correct. That is correct, Hicks. And when it's not, I will reference when we're looking at month over month or year over year when that is not the case. All right, so then I've done the same thing again as I did on the sales analysis, is I've broken it down by price point for you, by county. And again, you can kind of take a look and see. We're just going to look at Cherokee County real quick. The current inventory of properties under 500 are 776. It represents about 73% of the marketplace. And we've had 274 price reductions in that price range. And as you'll see, you carry it on down to 500 to $1 million and the $1 million plus, just to kind of give you an idea. So really the thing over here to take a look at is the price reductions, what the percentage has been, and it's trending right along with the closings that we're seeing. We'll take a look at it for Cobb County. Again, about 63% of the market is priced under 500, about 7.8% at the $1 million and above. And again, you can kind of see that under $1 million, about a third of the market has had a price reduction. The $1 million plus, not quite as many, just below 30%. And what I've been seeing is that $1 million plus market, they kind of got in touch with the market realities of what was going on in terms of pricing before all this happened. And they weren't pricing those homes as much out of alignment with what the buyers in the marketplace were willing to pay. So that's why you're going to see for Cobb and for the next couple counties where the $1 million plus isn't quite as high as the other priced homes. Taking a look at Fulton here, again, about a third of the market in total is overpriced. Just checking on my questions here to make sure I'm answering them as quickly as I can. So then where are we now from a pending inventory standpoint? We just looked at what's currently on the market, but what's been going on in terms of the homes that are going under contract and what's been going under contract as we have been living through all of this over the last 6+ weeks. So again, I'm breaking out by price point for you and by county. And this is what the entire market is down. And if you look at my column here, this is 2020, this is March of 2020 comparing to March of 2019. So Hicks, to your point, this would be a comparison of what we did in March of 2020 compared to what we did in March of 19. And the entire market for Cherokee County is down about 25%. So in other words, we've had 25% fewer homes go under contract in March in 2020 than we did in 2019. Hoping that makes sense to everybody as you're looking at this table. So for homes under 500,000, that number is actually 26%. Of the 500,000 to $1 million, only 6.5% of the market did we see a decline in pending sales. But as you'll see, it's really changed as we compare the next column. And then the $1 million plus down 84%. Now, the next column to the right is a comparison of where we were from an activity standpoint in March of this year, from March 1st through March 15th, compared to where we were April 1st through April 15th of this year. So showing you a month to month of the same year of where we've been. So from March 1st to March 15th of this year, compared to what we did in April 1st to April 15th, we've seen a 57% decline in the number of homes to go under contract for the entire market. And then you'll see the breakouts too of the homes under 500 has been 53% decline, 500 to a million and 84%, and then a million plus 100%. So we have not sold any homes in the million plus during that 4/1 through 15 time period compared to 3/1, 3/15. And we're going to look at that same thing. So this is kind of the sobering information that you guys are all kind of experiencing and living through right now. But I have to tip my hat and say kudos to many of you who have just adapted very, very well to what's going on. We're still seeing contracts come in. We're still seeing listings go on the market and get multiple offers in some cases, multiple showings. So the market is not completely dead. It is just off of, honestly, where we all expect it to be in a spring market. And so, it's like, just, this isn't meant to bum you out or to depress you. It's just the reality of it. And again, in my opinion, all this represents is pent up demand. The buyers just really can't get out into the market like they want to, unless, we're doing things creatively with virtual showings and things of that nature. But as soon as all of this gets lifted off of us, I think we're going to see a huge uptick in all of these numbers. And then again, we'll look at Cobb. You'll see it follows the same trend lines. 27%, we were behind 27% for the whole market, March over March. 56.3% for the first 2 weeks of March compared to the first 2 weeks of April this year. And then the corresponding price point breakdown. DeKalb County follows much along the very, very same trend lines. Again, 21.7 the entire market versus 58.1 over that same time period. And then looking at Fulton County, Fulton's been harder hit than some of the other counties, but 30% down in March over March, and then 67% for the entire market from March 1st of this year compared to the first 2 weeks of April. So let me get back to my questions. Can I go back to DeKalb real quick? Let's see. For which, based on the circumstances, would you recommend reducing pricing or holding or pulling home from market? If so, waiting to when to make the move. We're going to get, I'll hold that question because I'm going to touch on some of that in a little bit. And honestly, a lot of it depends on what the seller's circumstances are. I think with an inventory shortage that we have right now, if they need to sell, put the house on the market. If they have the time to wait, or there's no rush, or if they're going to need to find a place to go if they're selling their home, then those are all conversations that you need to have on a one-on-one basis, and just kind of provide good, wise counsel and share the numbers of what's going on in the market. Why is Fulton so much harder hit than DeKalb for a number of pending? I think it's a function of more inventory, and the more, as you look, if you remember the amount of inventory that Fulton had compared to the other counties that just have more inventory, the sales pace from a percentage standpoint seems to be equal across the county. So if you're basically selling at the same pace, but you have more inventory, it's going to obviously raise that percentage from a pending standpoint. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Go back to, here's DeKalb County by price point. Somebody was asking me to go back to DeKalb. So the entire market, month over month, March this year versus last is about 21.7% down. And in the first 2 weeks of March compared to the first 2 weeks of April, down about 58%. Okay, so that's kind of where we've been, and just to kind of summarize it, across all counties, inventory is down by over 30% versus the same time period in 2019. The exception would be Cherokee County, This reduction in inventory is only going to create higher demand, in my opinion, once the shelter-in-place order is lifted and all buyers re-enter the marketplace. Approximately a third of the active inventory is overpriced as we were moving into this situation. So I believe that properly pricing the homes once this shelter-in-place is lifted is going to be critical. And we're going to talk about what's been going on from an appreciation standpoint, specifically in Atlanta, in a little bit. And I'm going to show you a little tool that you can use just to kind of see if your sellers are in alignment with kind of where we've been appreciating as a city overall, or are they just kind of way out of the realm of appreciation? When adding up the withdrawn and hold statuses, there's only been a slight increase of homes coming off the market, indicating that most sellers have decided to keep their homes on the market. And, there's probably a couple of different schools of thought as it relates to the hold status that FMLS has introduced and the ability to do that. I'm imagining some sellers, because of health and safety concerns, have decided to don't want to have their house on the market right now, and have therefore, instead of withdrawing it and having to pay that withdrawal fee, just to put it in the hold status for the next 30 days to see what's happening. I imagine that there are some listing agents out there that are really mindful of what their track record has been from a days on market perspective, who maybe have had conversations with sellers encouraging to use the hold status so that number doesn't get artificially changed. But the reality is days on market, in my opinion, is going to be a somewhat meaningless stat for the next at least 90 days, if not going into 6 months, because of all of these. Well, number one, because of the fact that inventory just isn't moving like it once was. The numbers are going to be artificially inflated because of everything that's going on. And it's going to take us to kind of get back to more of a seasonal market, which it could be that days on market is screwed up for the rest of the year, quite honestly. So I wouldn't put a lot of faith in the days on market statistic moving forward as we come out of all of this, just because of all the dynamics that are currently going on. And then we've seen a significant declines in pending activity, being a big indicator of current pent-up demand, and buyers are waiting to re-enter the market. And we're going to talk about the conditions from a mortgage standpoint in a little bit. I'm going to have Rick jump on the call and kind of give his perspective on what he's seeing and how that is going to potentially impact buyers that you're currently working with in the market. So what's next? What do we think is going to happen as a result of all this stuff that's been going on? And, what can we be doing to prepare ourselves for the next however many weeks and months to come? And so a lot of this I have used or taken from Steve Harney's Keeping Current Matters. So if some of you have participated in his most recent webinar, some of this will look familiar to you, but it's got great conversation and topics and slides that you can use as you're having conversations with folks. And I actually altered his slide here because he had the top 5 questions we must be able to answer. I've said we have 6 questions that we must be able to answer. And of course, he says, start on off with be smart, be patient, but most of all, stay safe. And that still remains very, very true. But here are the 6 questions that I think we all need to be, they're either going on right now that you're being asked or that you're thinking about, but that we all need to be prepared to answer. The first is, when is the economy going to recover? The second is, are we going into a recession? Third is this going to be like 2008? The fourth, what about all those job losses? The fifth, which I've added, is what's going on in the mortgage world, and we're going to get a great insight from Rick in a moment on that. And then the sixth being, what should I do right now? So hoping to answer all of those for you over the next portion of the webinar here. So the first question, when is the economy going to recover? Well, as most of you know, there's been a pause button that's been hit to the American economy, and this really, for those of you that maybe watched Lawrence Yun the other day with the Atlanta Realtors Association Facebook Live. He kind of said, this is something that's unique and that this has been uh, something that's been done by the government. And, that they basically, by shutting us down, they've shut down the economy. So as soon as we all can come out from underneath this shelter in place, which we're going to see what's going to happen over the next several weeks with um, everybody with Trump saying he's going to give the power to the states and leave it up to the governors and everything else. It'll be interesting to see exactly as we start to creep out of this, what impact that has. And I believe it's going to be very much regional based. Because of that, I don't think at any point in time, all of a sudden the light switch is going to get turned back on. I think it's going to be something that we kind of come out of, not slowly, but at a good pace. And obviously with the stimulus packages that have been put into place, that certainly should help us as well. But this is what most of the major financial institutions are calling for, and I'm sure you've heard the term V-type recovery. And this is a slide that they were asked back on April 1st, and Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley are all projecting a V-type recovery. And if you look back historically, analysis has shown us that pandemics are usually V-shaped. Sharp recessions that recover quickly enough to provide little damage to home prices. And some very cutting edge search engine analysis by our information management team showed the current slowdown is playing out similarly thus far. And you can see that's from John Burns Consulting. And then another thing from the Harvard Business Review, it's worth looking back at history to place the potential impact of COVID empirically. In fact, V-shapes monopolize the empirical landscape of prior shocks, including epidemics such as SARS, the the 68 H3N2 Hong Kong flu, the 58 H2N2, and the 1918 Spanish flu, going all the way back to then. So again, we have a lot of things to look back on as far as where we think things are, how we're going to bounce out of this. But this is something that I came across that was in Wallet Hub. And this just came out about a week and a half ago. And it basically was taking a look at all 50 states across the country and which states were most exposed to the whole coronavirus and the impact that it was going to have on that state. And for once, it's nice for Georgia to be at the very, very bottom of the pack, because we are the state, according to Wallet Hub, that is the least exposed to what is happening with all of this. So that's a positive thing. I know that I actually came across this resource because Karen McCrae shared it with me as a result of a call that she was on with I believe the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. So a good sign that Georgia is insulated and stands a chance to bounce back the quickest here. I think we have a questions. Do we anticipate foreclosures because of job losses? We'll hold on to that for the mortgage conversation. And let's see. Okay. So the next question is, are we going into a recession? And, most of us who have been in real estate for any length of time remember back to 2008. And is this going to be like another 2008? And what you first need to recognize is, and you've probably seen some of this information in slides before. I know Jenny and I have shared it when we've been at various regional sales meetings, but a recession doesn't necessarily equal a housing crisis. It's just that the one that was most recent to us was a result of housing situations and subprime loans and basically a mortgage meltdown, which led to a housing meltdown, which we all recall. But with the exception of two recessions, the Great Recession being one, no other recessions have impacted the U.S. housing market, according to Freddie Mac Home Price Index data collected from 1975 to 2018. And here is a representation of that, the different recessions that we've experienced throughout history. again, the one that we all remember the most was the one the most recent, where we saw home values decline about 19.7% on an average. But all the recessions that were prior to that, except for the little blip in 91, we all saw housing prices increase, which we expect to be the case moving forward because of a lot of reasons, primarily the housing supply situation relative to buyer demand and low mortgage rates. I know that unemployment is something that is on everybody's mind, and we're going to jump into that a little bit and see how really unemployment historically hasn't had much of a bearing on what has happened as far as home values and prices goes. Is this going to be like 2008? Many still bear scars from the Great Recession and may expect the housing market to follow a similar trajectory in response to the coronavirus outbreak, but there are distinct differences that indicate the housing market may follow a much different path. While housing led the recession in 2008-9, this time it may be poised to bring us out of it. And that's from Mark Fleming, chief economist at First American. And again, these are just, great quotes that you can use to kind of back up your position. And what you're looking at here is basically what happened in the stock market or housing and mortgage crash back in 2007, 8, and 9, and the impact it had in the S&P versus the impact it had on home depreciation. And the stock market, or the S&P, fell 51%. Housing values, they did decline, and you see those things there, but not nearly as bad as the S&P did. What a 9/11 has in common with what is happening today is that this shock also has generated fear and anxiety among the general public. People avoided crowds then as they believed another terrorist attack was coming, and they are acting the same today to avoid getting sick. The same parts of the economy are under pressure: airlines, leisure, hospitality, restaurants, entertainment, consumer discretionary services in general. And again, another thing. And so once we can get out from underneath this, similar to some other things that are kind of more like the 9/11 is probably the best comparison, or even Katrina for those who went through it down in New Orleans, with the stimulus money that's come into the market in both cases. And then, just in 9/11, this is what happened with the stock market and what happened to prices. So actually, in the dot-com crash and the 9/11 crash, while the market went down, home prices improved. And you can see that in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, what actually happened with home prices and appreciation. And most of the talking heads and experts believe that will be the same case coming out of the coronavirus, is we're actually going to see home prices appreciate. Again, when if you watched Lawrence Yun on his webinar last Thursday, while he felt like we wouldn't see the number of sales this year like we did last year, which is to be expected because we're missing out on a good part of our selling season, he did think that home values would probably appreciate anywhere from 3 to 5%. So I think that we can expect that similar to be here in Atlanta because of the number of people that we employ and the number of relocations that are coming in and out of our city on a regular basis. The next thing I have is 2 slides here. This came from CoreLogic, again, talking about, what impact there's been on the housing market as a result of a recession. And what you see above is obviously the most recent one in 2007, when basically all markets, because this represents different parts of the country, basically saw a decline in values. But then what you have here are the different times before that. And the thing that I highlighted was the 2001 recession that started from the dot-com bubble burst had very little impact on the nominal home prices. And again, you can kind of see it. I've given you the reference here on CoreLogic, so you can go actually use it and open it up and take a look at it and read the entire article and kind of get a better sense of where these lines are. But the South Atlantic is dark navy blue. So as you look at the navy blue, you can kind of see where we were with the various ones. And then the other one here is to show the home price change 1 year into a recession. And again, all but in 2007, if you look at 2001, 81, and 80, we all saw positive gains in home prices as a result. of coming out of recession. And again, they're all expecting this to be very similar to those previous occurrences. One other thing too that you need to keep in mind as you're comparing what happened in 2007-8 to what's going on right now is, for those that were in the business back then, you can remember we were experiencing some crazy appreciation. And what you have here on this slide is the 6 years leading up to the housing crash, beginning in 2000, where there was 8.6% annual appreciation, led up to a high in 2004 of 12.5 and 11.4. That just isn't sustainable over a long period of time. But if you compare that to where we've been coming out of the last 6 years, 4.4, a peak of 6.4 in 2017, and kind of where we are right now at between 4 and 5%. That's just good, steady, solid, modest appreciation. So that's another reason why we just aren't in the same situation as we were back in 2007 and 8. Speaking of appreciation, this is the Case-Shiller index showing for what it just came out in March. And the challenge with the Case-Shiller is it is a trailing index. So when we got the information for March, it was really going back to what was happening in January in terms of pricing. But it's still important to kind of see where we were. And I've highlighted Atlanta here and where we are, what our number is, and the percent change. It was a 4.7% change. But this is the tool I was mentioning to you in terms of just general appreciation. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the Case-Shiller and how it works. This is just a graphical representation of kind of the roller coaster of the Case-Shiller for Atlanta specifically. And as you can see here, this gray area was kind of, here was the peak for Atlanta back in 2007. The Case-Shiller index was at 135-ish before it fell off. It dipped down all the way to 85. And closing out January of 2020, we were up to 155. And more or less what the Case-Shiller does is, if you go back to the year 2000, is everybody had a baseline of 100 points. And so then what they do is they measure, the average sales price of homes, and it does not include new construction, and it has to be a home that is sold more than once. So you're really kind of looking to see what true appreciation is for resale properties. And so basically what it means is, if we're at an index now of 155, that if I bought my house back in 2000 for whatever price, that for the entire period of time, or the last 20 years, with the appreciation and depreciation, my home in value theoretically should be 55% above what it was worth in 2000. That's more or less, in a very layman's terms, what the Case-Shiller represents. So, but again, as you can see, we had the decline here coming out of the Great Recession, and then the eventual steady climb up. And we're at an index right now of 155. Just to give you perspective, a year ago, January 2019, the index was a 148. So basically what you could take that for is that over the last year in Atlanta, now Atlanta in the Case-Shiller is a very large MSA. It is like 18 counties, so it's not really core county Atlanta to the counties that we look at. And then, the other 6 core counties would also include Gwinnett and Forsyth. But more or less what you could say by that number is that the appreciation in Atlanta has been 7%. So this is a great tool. If you'll click the link when you get these slides, the neat thing I like about this is you can move anywhere along this line, and you can see exactly what the Case-Shiller was for that point in time, for that month, in that year. So if you're working with a seller and they've been in their house, say, for 3 years, 3 years this January, the Case-Shiller 3 years ago was at a 132, and now we're at a 155. So that would show you kind of what the appreciation has been over the last 3 years, according to the Case-Shiller. And again, so if you're meeting with a seller and they're trying to price something way above that percent increase, you probably need to have a conversation with them about getting a little more realistic with what's going on with the price they're putting on the home. Now, that's obviously not taking into consideration if they've done improvements, if they finished off a basement or something to that effect, but it's just a good baseline for you guys to use. Let me jump to a couple questions here. Homeowner, for the most part, have had equity at this point that was not present in 2008. That's a great point, Hicks. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Adjusted for inflation, the last 6 are even lower. Very true. How much does the sales volume units change during a recession? Well, the sales volume is going to be a function of the average price. So we actually sold, if you can also look at the best place to look at the number of units that we sold on kind of like a citywide basis to compare that, Mary Ellen, would be to look at Realtor.com's release of existing home sales, and that could kind of show you. I hope I'm answering that question correctly. You might want to expand on that a little bit in the chat to make sure I'm answering that question for you. Does the case Schiller include attached homes or just detached? That is just detached homes, Bob, is my understanding. So no condos, townhomes is what they look for. All right, I think I'm caught up on questions. And to your point, Hicks, talking about equity and everything else, this is just a slide to kind of show you the then and now, kind of leading up to the Great Recession, the total home equity cashed out in billions by homeowners. And if you look and see that in 2005, 263 billion compared to 2017 when it was 71, 2006, 321 versus 87. And then in 2007, 240 billion versus 74. If you compare those totals over that 3-year span of time, sellers were basically using their homes, as you recall, as credit cards or lines of credit to support lifestyles, travel, cars, you name it. I can remember showing homes or seeing properties where you'd walk into a $800,000 or $900,000 house, and you'd walk in and there'd be absolutely no furniture in the place except for a big TV in the master bedroom and then 3 very high-end cars sitting in the driveway or in the garage. And the case now is that just because of the tightening of the lending that, again, Rick can maybe speak to in a little bit, people just didn't have the ability to take the equity out of their homes like they have. Plus, they learned the hard lessons, and they just aren't using it in the way that they did. So there's much stronger equity positions for most people in their homes. And this is another great slide that says that 53.8% of all homes in America have at least 50% equity in them. So again, there's some insulation there and some buffer in case things don't bounce back like we think they're going to, in terms of and what impact it might have on the housing. And then Americans are sitting on a tremendous amount of equity. 37% of all homes are owned free and clear these days. And then 26.7% of the mortgaged homes have at least 50% equity. So again, a much, much different situation than where we were back during the housing crisis and everything else. This is also kind of interesting, showing you the percent of median income needed to purchase a median priced home. It's gone down significantly versus 2006. So really affordability is more in our favor than it was back during the 2006-07 heyday. But 25.4% of the median income was needed to purchase a home versus 14.8 today. So again, another positive sign saying that housing is affordable, is desirable, and achievable. And then the other thing we have going for us, and we've already kind of touched on this, is just where were we in a month supply issue from then to now. And we had an 8.2 month supply of inventory pre-housing crisis. So definitely very much a buyer's market, not a seller's market, versus today a 3.1 month supply, and in a lot of cases even well below that. So good fundamentals there to indicate that we're going to come out of this quite strong just as soon as we can kind of get back into the mix of things. So let's talk about job losses. because we've been hearing a lot about unemployment, and some of the slides I'm going to show you are a couple weeks old, which honestly in this day and age seems like maybe eons ago. But we kind of all have been hearing and seeing what's been going on from an unemployment standpoint and how that might impact our ability to come out of this. But the first slide here is, and again, this is back on April 3rd, so a couple weeks ago, but I don't believe that the industries are all that different in terms of the unemployment numbers that are being reported right now. So the big bulk, which won't come as any surprise to anybody, is the 59.5% of the claims have been food services and basically bars. So again, no shock there. We all kind of realize that. We're trying our best to support our local establishments, so please continue to do that. But then if you look at the other categories, construction workers, healthcare office workers, again, you're like, wow, that seems like odd because that's where we need them. But, in a lot of cases, doctors, just for general health care and everything else are trying to maybe keep people away and, keep people healthy, and people aren't wanting to go into work. Child daycare workers, obviously, not something that's very, very available right now. Temporary health services, retail trade, 6.6%, and then the accommodation industry being that of like hotel, that kind of thing. If you add all those up together, it only leaves 9.8% of the rest of the job force out there that is actually part of the unemployed. And I would also venture to say that our numbers that we're hearing right now because of the stimulus package are probably a little overinflated than what they would have historically been in the past because of the ability to include the self-employed, the sole proprietor that used to not be eligible for some of the unemployment benefits that are being made available right now. So again, while we're hearing numbers like 15 to 25%, I think that's including a good segment of the market that because of their self-employment or sole proprietor status, just ordinarily hasn't been there, and they have the ability to kind of get back into the workforce like real estate agents and everything else. But this is what Goldman Sachs is projecting in terms of the unemployment rate for 2020. This is a national number, 15%, and then the impact that you see as we kind of get our way out from underneath this, going to 6.8 next year, and then getting back to kind of where we've been in a couple of years. And then the thing I wanted to share with you, and this came straight from USA Today in the newspaper back on the 14th, so not all that old. What are we, 6 days old? And it was an article, again, I've put the hyperlink down here so you can go read the entire article if you want, but it was basically kind of ranking the states that where they fell in terms of the unemployment. And it shows you the unemployment claims in Georgia since mid-March, and then the most recent week's unemployment claims from March 29th through the 4th is the second most in the country, and then the increase in weekly claims from 1 year ago, so forth and so on. Percent of workers in high-risk industries, which would be those that I showed on a couple slides before, like restaurant, retail, bars, and things of that nature. But the important thing to look at is the very last one is projected unemployment rate in July of 2020. 14.9%, which is actually the 11th lowest in the country. So I think all things being equal, being that we're kind of at the low end of the spectrum across the country in terms of unemployment, is a favorable thing for us to kind of rally behind as well. And so just keep that in mind as you are having conversations with folks. And then the last slide here is just the unemployment rates and the relationship that it has with home sales, and really showing that at the end of the day, unemployment rates and the home sales don't really have much of a direct correlation. And you'll see here, these are different points in time showing what your unemployment rates were kind of with what was going on in the various, the two here would be the .com 9/11 attacks. This is obviously going, number 3 would be during that housing downturn, and then 4 is kind of, what had happened or where we were historically during that given period of time. And as you can see along these lines, there's really no direct correlation. The yellow line does not follow the blue bars as far as any direct correlation there. So while yes, people need jobs to buy houses, the amount of unemployment reported, there really isn't a direct correlation if you look at the number of existing home sales relative to what the employment percentage was on this slide. All right, let's see. Get to a couple more questions here. I remember that. Okay, no more questions? All right. So what I'd like to do is, if I can, I'm going to attempt to patch in Rick Stevens on the call here. And Rick, I'm going to unmute you in a moment. And I want to talk about, have Rick talk about kind of what he's seeing in the mortgage market, what we can expect, things that we can do to be proactive with our clients and customers. So let's see, Rick, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm assuming everybody else can hear you. If I could just have somebody type in the chat or the questions that they can hear Rick. Excellent. All right, Rick, you're on. So you see me cover a lot of information, and obviously people's ability to get a mortgage is going to be critical as we bounce our way out of this. But I know there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of media attention being given to people with certain credit scores are being eliminated from the market, the jumbo products going away, the forbearance is having an issue on the mortgage environment and climate. But can you kind of just touch on some of those points and let the agents know kind of what impact that's having and what they can expect as we dig our way out of this?
Yep, be happy to. First of all, a lot of what you said, Todd, it's interesting. We've talked about it the last 2 or 3 weeks, right on with a lot of your conversations about everything from the general economy to what type of bounce back do we see, to are we in a recession, to how does 2008 compare to today, and everything you said to versus what we've heard is spot on. So, you know, this is nothing like 2008. 2008, as you said, was a mortgage problem. We created the problem. The virus created this problem. So this is a short-lived thing. So here's how I would describe today right now. Today, if I was talking to y'all 2 weeks ago, I would have had a totally different vibe or conversation versus today. Today, I would use the phrase that we're settled in. We're kind of settled in. We are where we are. We've had the changes that have occurred. We've actually had a little bit of improvement on a few places or products, I should say, over the last week or so. What's happened, I use the term flight to quality. Right now, when it comes to mortgages, it's all about the quality of the borrower. The one thing that hurt us was the stimulus package, as you alluded to. The biggest thing in that stimulus package was when they came out and they granted forbearance to anybody doing a mortgage loan. They didn't mean to do it when they came out the way it was. What they were trying to do was to say anybody that has a current mortgage loan that might get laid off. You've had a house for 2 or 3 years, you're going to get laid off. We're going to give you the right to file forbearance for any reason for up to 12 months. But that's not how it came out. It came out saying any new person doing a mortgage loan now has the right to file forbearance for up to 12 months. That statement did this. No servicer wants those loans. So what happened is we've taken the servicing world and there's no value in servicing anymore. Servicers do not want to take on loans where a borrower has the right to file forbearance. So because of that, here's what's happened. That's where I get the term flight to quality. The one place where the guidelines have become more stringent, whether you're talking conforming conventional, FHA or VA, our credit scores have tightened. The minimum credit score right now is 640, period, across the board. If you are talking about an FHA loan and your credit score is between 640 and 679, you can get that done, or 640 and 660, you can get that done but you're going to pay for that in pricing, because the belief is the lower credit score people are the ones that most likely, statistically speaking, are going to file forbearance. So the biggest thing that we've had to deal with is we just now have a tightening of the credit score, of credit scores in our industry. We do believe it'll be somewhat short-lived, but they got to fix that servicing issue. And until that gets fixed, I think we're gonna have that issue. With the exception of that, nothing else has really changed. Jumbo loans, I'll touch on that real quick. You all heard probably 2-3 weeks ago, a lot of our jumbo investors were suspending doing loans because of the unknown with servicing and everything else. I'm happy to report that we've had a couple come back in the market last week. We actually had one of our 90% jumbo investors re-enter a week ago tomorrow. So we now once again can do 90% jumbo pricing. It's not quite priced where it was, but you'd be in the low 4s, but you can now do a 90% jumbo loan up to a $750,000 loan amount. So that's good news. The other thing, y'all, to talk to your loan officers about, in lieu of that 90% jumbo, we just started doing, y'all remember the term piggybacking, where you do a first mortgage loan for 510, that maximum conforming, you do a second behind it. We actually can go up to 90 or 95% combined loan to value. So that's another option if you're in that $700,000 to $800,000 price point, and maybe they're going to sell a home after they buy a new one. You do a piggyback loan, they pay the second off after the first gets sold. So the jumbo world has its product back. It's not priced like it was. You're going to be in the 3 3/4 range on a 30-year fixed, 20% down jumbo loan, but that product is there. And like I said, some more investors have popped back in the market. Here's the one place I'm going to tell y'all to really be tight with your loan officer: self-employeds. Because of the environment, if you think about how we qualify a self-employed borrower, we qualify them on the past 2-year tax returns. 2020 year to date, and in particular, the last 30 to 60 days, many self-employeds have been hurt, meaning we qualify them on 18 and 19 tax returns, assuming they file the 19 return. And yet in 2020, they could be in a much different situation. So what's happened with jumbo investors and with Fannie and Freddie, they have come out and they have charged mortgage lenders to be responsible that we are validating their income for the last 30 and 60 days. So, and if their income is dropped, we are going to use that lower income. Obviously, and also we have to make sure they're still in business, that they haven't been impacted. If you're obviously in the hair business, if you're in the restaurant business, if you're in some of those areas that Todd's talked about already, you're going to be scrutinized very, very hard on your income just because income is down. So if you have a self-employed borrower, and if you're a listing agent, I would really be asking a lot of questions up front to the loan officer about where are they in the process. The other thing I'm going to say, I am shocked how many multiple offers we're still dealing with, and that's a credit to y'all and to the industry. Is not dead by any means. If you have multiple offers coming in as a listing agent, I'd be asking some of those questions up front. What does that person do for a living? Are they salaried? Are they commissioned? Are they self-employed? So that when you're trying to figure out what offer to counter or deal with, you have all the facts for your seller. So to me, the self-employed borrower for the short run, and I'm going to use the term for the short run because this is very short-lived, is the one area that we got to really, really be careful. Conforming stabilized, everything's being run through DU. I haven't seen Fannie Mae really tighten stuff up when you run loans through DU, which is their approval system. As long as your credit score in FHA is above that minimum threshold, you'll be fine with that. You're going to get popped a little bit on pricing right now with FHA. And then in the jumbo world, you got to have a 700 credit score. So as long as you're meeting those credit score criteria, I just don't think, we have not seen problems closing loans. So that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of some of the highlights that I want to mention on this call to be careful of. One other thing I do want to say on closings, I would leverage tight with your partner, with Campbell and Brannon. They're doing a bang up job, y'all. I can't speak highly enough about them. You know, they're doing the telenotarizing right now where we get them a package a day in advance. They go through that with their client on the phone. I mean, through computers. They read all the docs to them. They sign the docs, and then we just get the hard copies back the day of closing. So Campbell and Brand's a great partner to align yourself with right now. They're doing a fantastic job.
So Rick, let me ask you real quick. So, I didn't mean to up you. So, you know, I know you don't have the crystal ball or anything like that, but, you know, as far as the conversations you've been having with the different folks at Prosperity and what they're kind of looking at, you know, down the line here, how long are you guys anticipating that these stricter credit scores and, you know, everything else will be in place, and when will the rest of the market, so to speak, open back up to us?
Okay, well, on the credit scoring issue, I personally think it's all about the servicing thing with the forbearance. So the question is Congress going to deal with that? Are they going to put something in there to rectify that? So if they don't, my best guess would be once this thing turns back around, but I think we're looking at least the next 3+ months minimum before, because the forbearance issue is going to stay. So,
right.
You know, when I talk to Justin Messer, head of our secondary group, they're still of the belief that Congress, Tim Wilson believes, I mean, they're talking to people in Congress hard going, you've got to fix this. You've got to rectify this problem, because everybody recognized the fact that real estate leads us out of downturns. So they know that it's going to be us. It's going to be the agents. It's going to be us collectively leading, you know, this downturn. And I'm not going to use the word recession, because I just don't. I mean, we're in a down period of time for a couple of months, but I think it's quick down. I agree totally with the V. I think we're quick down and we're going to be quick back. You know, you mentioned it. We're projecting strong GDPs third and fourth quarter this year. So we do think it's a short turnaround, but I think it's a little bit unknown because of the forbearance created the tightening, and what will Congress do with that, which will turn it back around, in my opinion.
Yep. Got a question here, Rick, too. It says, do you think rates will go below 3% at any point in time?
I wouldn't be shocked if they did. One thing on the servicing front, rates are about 0.25% artificially priced high right now because of the servicing. I'll be really quick. What I mean by that is when Prosperity sells our servicing, we get a fee up front like everybody else who sells servicing to sell it. There's zero value in selling servicing. So you're getting nothing to sell that loan. So you have to make money on that end of it. So people have artificially had to raise rates by, you know, a quarter in rate to offset the fact that there's no value for servicing. So if we're sitting at 3 1/4 to 3 3/8 today, and we didn't have a servicing issue, we'd be pushing 3%. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got there. But I wouldn't be shocked if in 60, 90 days we're sitting where we are right now, or 3 3/8 or even 3.5. But we all agree the feds are going to keep rates down to help us turn out of this thing, because real estate's going to lead us out of this thing. So we expect rates to stay low. You know, I personally think if rates are at 3, 3 1/4, or 3.5, it's not going to affect anybody buying a home. So they'll stay good, they'll stay down, and I expect them to stay strong and low for the remainder probably of 2020.
Great. And I've got a question. Rich Hayes, if you're listening, I see your question, but I'm going to unmute you so you can phrase it like you want to, because I don't want to mess it up. I think you're asking about a self-employed that is qualified for the PPP, but I don't know what you're trying to ask. So, Rich, are you there?
Hey, I'm here, Todd.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and ask that question of Rick.
It's funny that we talk about the hair business. I have some clients that own a shop and had to shut down, and they have told me that they have qualified for the PPP.
Yeah.
And I don't, well, my question is that any help for them in the qualifying, since you were talking about you'll need 30 to 60 days of revenue to show when they're trying to qualify? So will this help at all?
Yeah, let me answer that question. It's interesting. We're talking about hairdressers. First of all, that's something I don't need since I don't have any. But besides that, I was having a conversation over the weekend with a client who the wife is a hairdresser, and she shut down 100%. She's doing no business right now. So I just had to tell that person today, when we go back and look at your last 30 to 60 days and you have no income, I can't tell you we can use income for you, because that's the whole point right now. We don't know when she's coming back or he's coming back to work. So in that example, it's a negative. That's the example of a self-employed person. It's like the gentleman that owns the restaurant or the lady that owns the restaurant. You're gonna have a hard time getting a mortgage loan right now. That's just the fact of the matter. It's short-lived, but it's just the way it is right now. I want to address the stimulus question on conforming loans. First of all, it's never a plus to have filed. We understand why they filed. It's never a plus to have filed. On conforming loans, it's not a deal killer. On jumbo, it's tougher. Just remember the jumbo world. It's a stricter underwrite anyway, and it will be scrutinized a lot harder. So if somebody has filed, the best answer I can give you, if somebody has filed for that stimulus check, it needs to be submitted into that underwriting group ASAP to get feedback how we're going to handle. That's the best advice I can give you, because every deal is different. The industries are all different, but it's not by itself looked upon as a positive if you have filed. I'm not telling you you can't do it, but it's not going to be a positive.
All right, great. And another question, Rick, the forbearance.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about how that works, and you know, are people dinged for that, or from a credit standpoint? And because I'm sure that we have some agents out there who might have some clients who are in a home and they've been laid off, or they're currently without work, and
Yep.
they're contemplating it. How is them exercising that right option? How could that affect them? How long would it be in effect for? And in my opinion, probably a good way to not have to go into a foreclosure situation.
Yeah, the forbearance, as I understand it, and as I've been told, is when they file forbearance, it does not affect their credit. It does not show up on credit. So it's my understanding what's happening, Todd, is if you take, let's just use 12 months, your payment is X dollars a month, and you file 12 months of forbearance, you don't make that payment, that money is accumulated and recorded as a second lien on the home, and it's paid off at the time of sale. And it does not affect their credit. See, so from that standpoint, it will not be. Now, how will that be looked upon down the road? I can't answer that question, obviously, today, but it will not be dinged on credit the way it was written in the stimulus package.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. And there was a question earlier about, do we think we're going to see a number of the foreclosure number increase? I would say there's a slight possibility of that, but with this forbearance option, I think people will take advantage of that, and then hopefully try and get back to work so they can begin making their mortgage payments again. And again, because of the equity positions that people have in their homes, and they haven't taken out a lot of equity in the past, that I don't think we're going to see the number of foreclosures to any extent like we saw back in the housing crisis. So, but if you have people that are in a tough situation, that might be something that you encourage them to take a look at and get into. Rick, anything else before we move on to something else here, or any other
No,
questions for Rick?
I would just encourage everybody on the call just lean into their loan officer, for additional questions that they have. Obviously, we all have the same knowledge. We all get the same information, and just dial into your mortgage loan officer, and he or she can help you. And we appreciate all the support, and just reach out to us. We want to be your partner through this process. I can't stress enough, Todd, real quick. I think, like you said, this is pent-up demand. So if you're going to rest now, because we're all going to be busy in a few months. I just think it's a late spring, and I think with pent-up demand, we're gonna have a really good, strong second half of the year. As we come out of this thing. So anyway, hope this helps a little bit, and the best to everybody.
Thank you, Rick. Greatly appreciated. Awesome resource as usual. All of the Prosperity folks, any one of your loan officers in your offices are a great asset and resource for you to take advantage of. So, all right. So let's finish up with what should I do right now? I know that all of you have been actively doing what you can from home, doing virtual showings, actually getting out here and there, trying to do your best to service your clients and customers and stay engaged and everything else. And here's what I think you should be doing right now. 5 things. The first is acknowledge and accept things aren't going back to normal. And by that, I mean the normal that we used to know prior to this pandemic will not be the normal that we go back to. And I guess for those that have been in the business for a while and can remember what life was like before the recession, the housing crisis, and what it was like afterwards, they were dramatically different. And I can remember when I was a broker, and the agents that were honestly struggling the most with the new world of what the housing crisis created seemed to be at times the ones that struggled the most, because they were the ones that had to kind of really refine and retool what they had been doing up to that point. And the agents that got into the business in the middle of all of that, that was their reality. So that's what they just naturally came in and they worked through and worked around. And should have brought this up when I had Rick on the call, because he kind of used the analogy of kind of where we are in the mortgage world right now. Had an agent in the Buckhead office say to him, "Oh, so this is just kind of like going back to the way things were 4 or 5 years ago." You got to keep in mind that the lenders in the mortgage world, they have been loosening the standards. I mean, for a while there, right after coming out of the housing crisis, I mean, you had to be near perfect on paper and have to give your firstborn child, before you could get a mortgage. And as time has gone on, they've loosened the standards up and everything else, and we got to the point where we were. And all this is a kind of a little bit of a hit in the reset button a little bit in terms of the mortgages go. But I would suggest to you, as you're currently in this situation and thinking about what things are going to be like when we start getting out of all of this and getting out from underneath all this, is things will not be back to where they were when we went into this. So you need to adjust your mindset and your thinking of, what does my new normal look like? We've all been embracing and using new tools and technology that we thought that we probably would never use before all this. We've done virtual showings. We've done virtual open houses. I would anticipate, especially with the millennial generation that we're going to be all working with for the next many, many years, this is kind of like right up their wheelhouse. This is the way they like to do business. So to think that we're going to all of a sudden go back and not have Zoom meetings anymore, or go-to meetings, or go do virtual showings or things of that nature, just isn't going to be the case. I think you also need to be prepared with the short term of working in the new mortgage realm and the new environment and everything else, and what that looks like, and having conversations with your clients and giving them wise counsel in regards to letting the folks over at Prosperity guide them through the process, because it's an ever-changing daily thing. And you want to have a valued asset and resource in your back pocket with regards to getting people qualified, making sure the deal's going to close, making sure that there aren't any delays or any things of that nature. So, I mean, I think you need to be thinking about what your new normal is going to look like and how you're going to adapt to that and how you're going to change. I think the next thing is communication is critical. I know that many of you have been staying in touch with your sphere, your clients, your contacts, your family, and everything else. And as human beings, for the most part, we like to be around other human beings, and we're sociable creatures by nature. And so keeping in contact with your clients right now is critical. And there's lots of different things that you can be doing when you're reaching out to them. I mean, the first thing is, knowledge is power, and your knowledge of what's been happening in the marketplace and what has happened and what's currently going on and what you think is going to happen moving forward. That's kind of the whole point of this webinar is, to give you some of those talking points and those tools and those resources. So when you have those conversations with your clients and customers and sphere, you're talking from a place of knowledge, not just a headline that you read somewhere that's basically there to try and inject fear or panic into somebody, or just sell newspapers or commercial spots on the TV. So I think, sending a market update, not a what's my home worth necessarily in today's market, because that's an ever changing, and I think we're going to see home prices increase, but just kind of give them a, hey, here's what's going on now, here's where we were, here's where we are, and here's where I think we're going to come out of this thing. And it could just be a snapshot, really. So that's something to think about. The other thing too, going back to the question of advising a seller, when is a good time to sell, or what should they do? Should they sit tight? Should they put the house on the market? I believe everybody's circumstances are unique and different. That's not changed since we got into this, but it's ever more important that you ask those questions about what are your circumstances? Why are you thinking about selling? Is it because you realize that you're being driven crazy by being in such tight quarters with folks? I mean, is your work environment? I heard Lawrence Yun the other day say, we might find out that people are going to be doing more work from home with all of this technology that we have at our disposal now. Does that create the need to have a dedicated home office? Is the house too small? Do we have two people working in the house that are going to be working more from home? What does that look like? So I think you have to have conversations with sellers that are going to be, tell me about your situation. What are you hoping to accomplish? What is your time frame? And understand and appreciate that everybody's circumstances are unique. The next thing, I think, you've heard us talk about being the trusted advisor in the past, and that's really just kind of being the voice of calm and reason. And again, because people were just, sociable creatures by nature, and when you call somebody, people, this is a new thing for all of us, being pretty much, cooped up in our homes and not being able to interact with the people we're used to interacting with, certainly interacting with each other, going into our offices. I think we're all feeling some of this effect of what it's like to be in this new age right now. But sometimes just calling and listening and having somebody just share kind of what they're feeling is all they really need. But you're being there, you're listening, you're, again, being a trusted advisor and resource for them. And then the other thing too is, be cognizant of what you're putting out into the universe. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And, as much as politics can sometimes be polarizing, people's view and opinions of all of this that's going on right now can also be quite polarizing. You have some people on the one end of the spectrum that think that this is all being overblown, and we just all need to rush in and get back to work. And then you got some people who want to be practical and calm and kind of take it in measured steps. And then you have other people on the other end of the spectrum that just think that we need to be extra cautious and make sure this thing completely blows over so we don't have a second reoccurrence, going around, or whatever the case may be. So I think you just need to be mindful of the fact that your people, your sphere, the people that, are in your realm, all are probably on different places on the board as it relates to kind of what's going on around us. And just be mindful of the information that you're putting out there, the communications that you're doing, the marketing that you're doing. Are you sending the right message, or are you sending a message that might have unintended consequences? So just be sensitive and be aware of the things that you're kind of putting out there via social media and everything else, and what the impacts might be of that. I think the third thing is you need to be honing your critical skills now. What are those critical skills? I mean, I think the critical skills align with new market realities. And again, I'll send out the links to these articles that I'm going to reference right now and talk about. But, we mentioned, millennials and the way they like to do business. 85% of millennials actually believe that home ownership is something worth pursuing. The challenge is that they're just delaying their entry into home ownership. And it's just because they're a little bit later on in their stages of life in terms of getting into relationships, getting married, having children, things of that nature. So they're not jumping into housing like the baby boomers did, for example. It's not that they don't think that home ownership is important and it's not a pursuit that they want. It's just that they're a little bit later on. And, since they are going to represent the largest segment of the buyers and sellers in our market for the years to come, what are you doing right now to hone your skills to be in front of and be able to, reach and resonate with those millennials? And a couple of things to know about them is millennials are willing to shop for over a year to find an acceptable home. Now, talk about a sales ramp up time. Just know that they're in a lot of cases in no real hurry. A lot of times they're a little bit cautious of, just the whole process and everything else. But, it's going to probably be a little bit longer of an incubation period with the millennials. So how are you going to adjust the skills that you have now to accommodate and work with them? With all of this stuff right now with the technology, millennials want new homes with new technology. So as you're looking in, the smart homes and everything else is of real interest to them. So as you're showing them properties and everything else, that's something to kind of be mindful of. In terms of dealing with them from a technology standpoint to begin with, we all, were under the assumption for a long time that all they wanted to do was communicate via text. Well, that's not necessarily ending up being the case, but they want to use technology. They want to use things like, Zoom or doing virtual tours and virtual open houses. So what are you going to do to align yourself with the new market realities in terms of the skills that you currently have? Again, jumping back to the housing crisis, I can remember before all that happened, most agents didn't know how the heck to even deal with a foreclosure, let alone a short sale. What's a short sale? I don't even know what a short sale is, never heard of it. But then coming out of that, remember, short sale was like common language of the real estate industry, and learning to work with the banks and what the process looked like and so forth and so on. Those were new skills that people had to develop. And the ones that were in the business prior to that, I think there was a longer learning curve there than the ones that jumped into the business. And short sale was just like another, real estate term. It's just one of those things that was always there. So what are things that you can be doing now that are going to be there and in the marketplace when we come out of this? Things like our mobile app. How well do you really know the mobile app, and how can you use it? One thing that I heard that was interesting was Zillow is reporting that their online views, their traffic in general, is 35% down. It's 35% down since when we got into this crisis. Now, you would think it would be just the opposite, that people would have more free time and they'd be online looking at properties and everything else. But the reality is that's not where people are spending their time. They're not spending it on the computer. Guess where they're spending it? Their mobile device. That's where they're spending a majority of their time. And as a result of that, while website traffic is down about 35% for Zillow, it's also down for us. You think maybe the virtual tours and page views and everything would be up. That's not the case. They're getting it through their phone, mobile, and social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. So if you aren't ramping up your marketing efforts to have more of a presence on those sites, and they're going there and they're looking and they're doing property views from there and they're clicking things and they're doing all of that kind of stuff, that's where they're getting the information. It's almost being pushed out to them from those social media outlets by the posts that you do, or even boosting your ads that you run, or even little digital banner ads. It's all pushing out versus, coming into Zillow, somebody's got to go onto the website to look for the information. So again, not to say that it's not important to like look at your website and be beefing it up, but what are you doing to push content out, relative content, and putting your virtual tours, your listings out there and everything out, engaging with your sphere on social media? That's the new market reality right now. And then the other thing I would say would be to master your market vital signs. And, similar to, you've heard me say this before, similar to when you go to the doctor, one of the first things they do is they listen to your heart, they take your blood pressure, they take your temperature. Those are all vital signs. That's how they determine whether or not you're healthy or if you're not right, you're not feeling well or something's wrong. What do you believe are the current market vital signs? I still think things like month supply is a vital market sign. I think things like average sale price will continue to be a huge vital sign. I think the amount of homes available for sale on the market, the current inventory, is a vital sign. So you need to know what those vital signs are for your specific market that you work and be able to rattle those off without even having to think about it. Because when somebody does ask you how's the market or what's going on in the market, you need to be prepared to answer. You need to be able to be telling them, well, you know what, inventory is down, but honestly, that's not a huge problem if you're talking to a seller, because guess what? That just means less competition on the marketplace, and we still have buyer eyeballs out there looking and everything else. And just as soon as we all can get out from underneath this, the buyers are going to be coming in droves. So that brings up the next thing too, is you need to be working on your sellers and contacting your sellers now, because I think we're just a couple of weeks away from really the floodgates opening. And by floodgates, I mean just people being able to get back out from underneath their houses. Do I think that all of a sudden the light switch is going to get turned on and it's going to be gangbusters and we're going to be selling things like crazy? No, because each geography is going to be different and people are going to be at certain levels of caution as they come back out into the marketplace. We also do have the question of the availability to mortgages that Rick talked to and kind of how we're going to have to work our way through that. You're going to have some people that are going to be in a situation that are ready to buy now. You're going to have some people that are going to be in a situation that need to put their houses on the market because they are getting that job transfer to Houston or whatever, despite what's going on in the economy right now, and they got to go. And I know a lot of people have been having a lot of free time at their homes and probably cleaning out closets or doing those things on the to-do list that they've been putting off and getting their homes ready to go. If you're not having the conversations with those folks to see what they've been doing, going back to communication is critical, you're not going to know that they've been doing all this work and maybe been thinking about, we got a whole bunch of people graduating from high school and college this year, a whole lot of empty nesters that are getting ready to enter into the marketplace. But you're not going to know who those people are, going back to, again, unless you're having those conversations with people and seeing where they are, seeing how many trips they've been making to Home Depot or Lowe's lately. But you need to understand what your market vital signs are, so when you start engaging in that conversation and they say, well, what do you think? I know all this craziness is going on right now, but do you think we should put the house on the market now? My answer, my personal answer would be absolutely. Let's put it on. We have no inventory. We've got buyer demand. It's pent up. Show them the slides that we shared with you and, have that conversation with them depending on when all this, depending on what the unique circumstances are. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is take care of you. You've got to be healthy and you've got to be in the right headspace in order to help and support and serve people. So you got to be taking care of yourself. You got to be doing those things to kind of look out for you, stay healthy, eat well, get exercise, get your mind in the right headspace to have these conversations with people, because guess what? People are all stressed. Everybody's stressed out right now with everything that's going on. You're going to need to be the voice of calm and reason, be the trusted advisor for when you're having these conversations with people, especially these critical conversations when you're coming out of this and people are re-entering the marketplace. You need to position yourself to be ready to be there to take advantage of all that. But you can't do that if you're not healthy yourself and in a good frame of mind. So let me see. I've had a couple of questions. Anything that we cover that anybody would like me to expand on? Let's see. Let's see. Hicks says this extrovert is going crazy and needs a haircut. Can't help you there, Hicks, but happy to give you a call and shoot the breeze and talk about the Masters in November. Let's see. Thank you, John. I appreciate Mason. I appreciate the kind comments. Much more efficient, more virtual showings to save time and narrow short list. I love that. That is true. I think one advantage of this current market dynamic is it has eliminated a lot of those buyer tire kickers. And one thing that Rick didn't talk about, but we did talk about the other day, is only the serious buyers right now are going to be able to get financing. So you know that the people that you're working with, assuming that you have gotten them pre-qualified, are going to be ready to buy versus spending your time running around all over Atlanta looking at every property that comes onto the market. Let's see. Watch what agents are doing on social media and don't mimic. Be a resource. Absolutely. Hicks, agree. Avery, I'm not calling you a late bloomer. Steve Harney says we should be focused on pending sales, not closings, because those were already under contract before all this happened. Completely agree. That's why I said what I said earlier, Tanya, that I think we can pretty much flush the statistics down of what happened in the first quarter of 2020. Was really kind of just giving that to you as a reference to where you can kind of see where the market was, not because I think it's what's going to happen in the market moving forward, but because, you know, people will want to blame whatever is going to be going on in the current new realities with what's happened with the pandemic. And what I wanted to share with you is here's what happened leading up to it, and here's the situation with the number of properties that are overpriced, were overpriced. That was happening well before, and it's just our new reality now. I think, you know, I saw something interesting the other day, excuse me, with there's a little bit of disconnect between buyers and sellers. I think there typically is, but I think there was a surveyor poll that asked sellers if they felt like their homes were priced properly. I think 65% of the sellers felt like the homes were priced properly. And then they asked the same question to buyers, and 58% thought that their homes were not priced correctly and that they should be getting a discount because of what's going on in the marketplace. We're going to continue to kind of deal with that little polarization of, you know, what buyers think and what sellers think. That's going to be your job as their trusted advisor to, again, help them understand and embrace the new market realities and where we are in the market. And we'll see, you know, over the next weeks and months to come on what the impact is on pricing. I don't think we're going to see prices deteriorate. If anything, I think we're going to see them go up because of lack of inventory. Builders, if you look at the builder, what they've been asking builders lately, they've seen a huge drop off in contracts written. The builders aren't building like they once used to build, not helping our supply issue right now, plus they have labor issues and everything else. So again, I think everything is pointing favorable to us. To what I said earlier, I don't think we'll sell the number of homes that we did last year this year. However, I think that we'll see average sales prices go up because of the whole supply and demand function going on right now. Where to get the slide presentation? It'll be on SharePoint for you. I will point you in the location just as soon as I figure out where I'm going to put it. Cindy Lee, you're welcome. Let's see. I'm growing hoarse here. Do I think it's best to get a pre-appraisal to get the pricing correct? I would say yes. And because I don't think, again, the appraisals, you know, they're going to rely on sales history for the last 30 to 60 days. If they have to go back further, they will. But leading up to this, closings that occurred in March, we didn't see a huge drop-off. As a matter of fact, the average sale price that we realized for Harry Norman in March was $475,000, if my memory serves me correctly. It was the highest average sales price that we've ever had as a company. That was the trend going through all of January, February, and March. We kept seeing home prices go up. If you saw what I showed earlier about the Case-Shiller, 7% appreciation in Atlanta, generally speaking, from last January to this January. So we saw home prices ticking up. I don't think you're going to have an appraisal issue right now. We'll have to see what happens, though, over the market over the next 60 to 90 days as we start putting homes under contract that weren't under contract pre all of this craziness. So, but I would think right now an appraisal would be a good idea, especially if you're working with a seller who's giving you pushback, and get them, you know, kind of more in alignment with pricing. Let's see. Hicks, Dave Wagner said you can borrow his clippers. You'll have to work out how y'all going to social distance pass those off. Let's see. I will be doing a follow-up to this in another 30 days, just to kind of see where we are. It will not be nearly as long. It'll be more about just kind of the statistics itself. I'll get that information out to you guys and when the next meeting will be for that. Do I think the spring market's going to ramp up into summer, fall, assuming the economy is opened back up somewhat, or will it wait until next spring? I do not think it's going to wait until next spring, Rachel. I think what we're going to see happen is the folks that still were planning on moving are still going to move. And I think, if anything, do y'all remember, for those that were around, when we were coming out of the housing crisis and there was the first-time home buyer tax credit? And that flipped the seasonality of the real estate market completely on its head and upside down. And we had more sales in November, December in January of that year. That home buyer tax credit was initially rolled out, and then it got extended, and then even more people came to the market. It didn't matter what time of year it was because that tax credit was extended there. I think the stimulus is going to do something similar in that it's just delaying what we're going to see. Again, people, Jenny has said it before, people sell houses because of life changes. And, regardless of this pandemic, those life changes are still occurring. Families are expanding, families are shrinking in terms of kids leaving the nest and going and empty. You got the empty nesters, jobs are changing, you name it. There's so many things that go into, why somebody would have a life change to necessitate a new type of housing. That's not going to, I think, be any different. So I think we're just going to see it delayed. Hopefully, we're back into full swing June, July, and we're just going to kind of push through those months, and it's just going to be a delayed impact. How are appraisers compensating for values for home mortgage loans? Should we allow for a longer wait period or to have an appraisal report to be completed? Darlene, I will defer that one to the mortgage experts, and we will get back to you on that one. I don't want to say anything that I have opinion on that, but I'm not going to, I'd like to talk to Brendan and the guys over there before I say anything. What is SharePoint? Yes, SharePoint is the cloud, the H&R cloud, and that's where the information will be in a folder. Let's see. Appraisals are not taking more time at this point. I think the question, Rick, though, was, I'm sorry. Appraisals are not taking any longer right now. They're getting completed in the same amount of time. So, all right. That is all the questions I think I've gotten through. Again, I appreciate y'all for being here. Stay tuned for the next kind of follow-up to this webinar that we'll be hosting again. We'll kind of take a look more at just the statistics itself and see what impact the reduction in pending sales has had. But my message to you guys is the real estate market is still there. You guys are doing a great job. I've heard many stories of all of you getting multiple listings, multiple offers on those listings. Stay at it, stay strong. We're going to get through all this together. And actually, I think we're going to come out this on the other side even better than we were before. So thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.